Welcome to Philly Tech Connect podcast, where Philly's tech minds meet. CEOs, developers, dreamers. This is your space. Each week, we explore the journeys of tech innovators. Join us and be inspired.
Hey everyone, Dave here with another episode of the Philly Tech Connect podcast. Today I'm speaking with Mr. Russ Starke. He is the CEO of Think Company, a national service design and digital experience design and development firm based in Philly. And he has over 25 years of experience and has won a number of awards. He is also a strong proponent of community. He's been on the board of Sunday Breakfast Club, as well as a dozen other ones. If you check out his LinkedIn profile, go to the volunteering section. It is long, it is lengthy. So we are talking about someone who has been quite involved in the Philly community. Russ, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Dave.
Pleasure to have you on the show. I was introduced to you through a community member, Jay, and was just super impressed with your background, your history, to the point of not even necessarily being sure where to begin. And so I have some various topics I'd love to get your thoughts on. And I figured I'd start by just talking about digital solutions like 25 plus years ago, when, if I understand correctly, predating Think Company and everything there, kind of early days of what we think of as the internet. Tell us a little bit about that time and then how I guess it evolved to what it is today.
Sure. Yeah. When I first moved down to Philadelphia, right out of grad school, I worked for a company that out in University City, and we were doing it was computer-based simulation training, and we were developing that stuff in a proprietary software and delivering solutions like on CD-ROMs. So it was kind of the crazy days of literally running and chasing UPS trucks from stop to stop to make sure we got it off to the client in time. It was very different than it is now. And the internet was a thing, but I think even when I started there, we didn't even have email at first. So it was like some real classic stuff when we first started, and then email came online, but we didn't deliver really any internet solutions there till later. And by that time, I had moved on specifically actually to work more on user experience internet-wise. So I had to go to other companies for that kind of thing. But yeah, those first 5 years were when it was transitioning over.
Did the hurdles that you just mentioned, did it make it more fun that that's what had to be done? Or no, has this fun kind of evolved in different ways over time?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know. I think we all equate the early years of our career with fun, right? What's happening now, which we all are experiencing, being on the other side of COVID, I think a lot of us are talking about like how work was before COVID and how much different it was, and lamenting the way things are now to a degree, because kind of that interpersonal closeness it's not where it was, right? No matter how good the online tools are. But the fact is, and I talk to people about this all the time, it's not that like companies have changed, it's that the world has changed. And then companies had to change along with it. So we can lament those things, but it's also because we were all, however many years, 5 years younger, and things were different, and the landscape was different, and the world was different. And I think that happens I think it's happening more and more frequently now. But I think that's even how I look back on those early days. Like I was such a different person. Everything was different. So it's easy to get nostalgic about it.
I feel that quite as well, looking back at some of my older businesses too. You have had a role change at Think Company. If I understood correctly, maybe it was about 6 years ago, you became the CEO from another role. What can you tell us about that time period and transition to CEO? And in what ways may or may not have empowered you with some type of advantageous perspective of not being the original quote unquote founder?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think in the same way so I was lucky to work for really good founders who did a really good job when they held the C-level titles. And I was part of the conversations that led to the creation of the company in the first place around, hey, what would we do different if we were going to create our own company? So then we did that for a bunch of years. And I think just even as an individual, you can't help but be like, okay, well, if I was doing that job, I think I might do it this way. And everybody brings their different pieces of personality to it. So for me, it's always been about, I did work for a bunch of CEOs and things like that in my own personal history, not Carl, who held it here, but just folks that kind of seemed distant, and they wanted like a firewall between them and the rest of the organization and things like that. And I never liked that. And I know the way it made me feel. So it was an opportunity for me to be like, hey, what would it look like if I kind of radically leaned into it on the other side of that coin? And I think as we all learn, right, some of that works and some of it doesn't. Because that's what one of the biggest things I tell folks when they're about to go through similar changes is that the nature of the work definitely changes, where maybe it's not as much of the physical lift in terms of there's still a lot of hours and things like that, but it's not the grinding to get deliverables done. It's much more of an emotional lift than I would have ever even thought. Things happen on your watch. Well, it's your problem and it's your responsibility. And it's a real different thing.
It sounds like the way in which you approach being in the CEO position is to have less barriers between you and your team and maybe having these more kind of intimate human friend connections with them. Is that true? And does that ever backfire when you feel like you need to be somewhat disciplinarian or to be, I don't know, strict with somebody, whatever the right word is there?
Yeah. In short, I have had to learn how to balance. Like when a company becomes a certain size, and we're a decent size now, about 125 people, and that just doesn't work when it's flat. We tried that even at much smaller sizes, and it doesn't work. When you're a company of a certain size, you need to know where the accountability lies, where the responsibility is, who's the one who's allowed to make the decision. So there has to be some kind of hierarchy. And to me, I respect and understand and know that there needs to be a functional hierarchy, but I try not to have the social hierarchy that usually accompanies that. But I have learned that, look, there are some times where I need to kind of stand down or stand off to the side and let managers handle these kinds of things that I might otherwise go running towards. So you learn how to kind of temper yourself, because absolutely there are all kinds of different difficult decisions and conversations that have to happen in business over time. And there's times that it's appropriate to be very, I always want to be vulnerable and be helpful and have good relationships with people, but you have to also know where the boundaries are. And that can be tough sometimes.
Yeah. Shifting gears for a little bit, I noticed when I was perusing your LinkedIn, specifically the volunteering section, you're on just a number of boards. There was something like the Sunday Breakfast Club, there was PACT, there was the Chamber of Philadelphia. I'm wondering, so are you a good guy who has trouble saying no? And how is it how do you get on all these boards? Yeah. What are the expectations of a board member? If someone who's out there thinking like that, maybe they want to assemble a board, what does it look like? What's the give and take?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely have trouble saying no. That is absolutely part of why there's so many of those. But I think that's also because there's so many people in Philly in particular. There's so many organizations doing really great work. So when they reach out, it's hard not to feel flattered that folks are reaching out and that they think that you can help them in some way. So it's easy to say yes to all these great organizations. But I think what I've tried to do is I think everybody should do it over time. And I've always said, I think it's good to have a good compass of some of these are really good for networking and for just digging deeper into the business community and getting to know more people. And that's good both for your organization and for you as an individual. It's one of the best ways to do it because you're not just walking around shaking hands, like you're doing something shoulder to shoulder with other people and getting to know them in a different kind of way. And they get to see who you really are. So that's really good. So that can be the chamber or that can be PACT or things like that. Although certainly those organizations do a lot of great outreach, mentorship programs and all those kinds of things. But then the other side of that is, I think, finding organizations like I have with Broad Street Ministry, which is now going to be Broad Street Love, and Greener Partners and other places that are just doing really important work in the community for the homeless or for getting fresh food to food deserts and things like that. And being like, yeah, that matters to me. And I think I have something I can offer. And basically, if you think you have something to offer, then you do. And these organizations need people who are willing to kind of roll up their sleeves and do something about a lot of the issues that we have in Philly. So it's not hard to find them. Pretty much all these organizations need people to help out, either officially on a board or just to kind of know when they're going up against a big problem, hey, who's with me? And they love hearing that you're with them.
There's a lot of human-centric just dialogue in the way you speak, in your ethos. Yeah, but at the same time, you are kind of working in this digital solutions industry, which undoubtedly is then incorporating AI and seeing more and more of that. So how are you guys sort of handling the change, the adjustment in these times?
Yeah, great question. Because I think it's real easy to kind of jump on the bandwagon, especially when AI is part of your offering. and talk about it in a way that it's going to change everything for the better. It's going to change everything, but I don't know if it's universally for the better. So I think it's important to kind of be clear-eyed about it. I have never been, and the organization has never been about technology for technology's sake. We've only been interested in it when it supports and betters human experience. And I think AI absolutely shows where it can do that, but we're more interested in how it can make people bionic rather than replace them or displace them or disenfranchise them, right? So yeah, when you use AI to crunch lots of data that would take you a really long time to do, or you might not even see the patterns because it takes such an amount of focus, then that's a great way to use AI. It's a fantastic way to use AI to get you past the blank page when you have to do a first pass at a blog post or a meeting agenda or whatever the creative thing is that you're creating. That's all fine. I think where it starts to blur is when people get real gung-ho about how AI might replace people, might bring down the amount of folks you need to hire and raise margins. And that's where I start to get a little, I don't know that that's great. And certainly on the personal side, I have major issues with using AI to create creative works like music or art and things like that. In 5 years from now, why does a kid pick up a paintbrush or why does a kid pick up a guitar? Why would they even do that? And I just think, I don't care if I sound like a Luddite, I think that's a real shame. So I hope that we all work to figure out the balance. And there's still a balance now because AI is not doing those things great. It's doing them okay. And so, I mean, that's a long-winded answer, but I think I'm always keeping my eye on how does this help people and enhance their productivity and make their lives better, not have them scared that, oh my God, my job is going away. And I think, again, it's really easy to wave that off with, we'll upskill and reskill. But you can't just say those things. You have to know what that actually means, it actually looks like in practice.
I think it's a sound opinion, but it's one that maybe is a bit contrarian and that many people, especially leaders of companies, may not always be on board with, depending on their level of kind of human centricity. You had a video that I watched recently about caring enough to argue with someone who doesn't share your beliefs, which I think is a practice many of us have given up on over the years, especially with the way kind of division has evolved in this country, just feeling like we're not getting through to each other. So why don't I just surround myself with people who think like me and then I'm having a good time, right? Because we're all just patting each other on the back, talking about how smart we are and how aligned we are and how everyone else is dumb. But your video is why that's not a good for society. Tell us a little bit more about how you approach like conversation with other individuals that you don't see eye to eye with.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate you saying that AI opinion is contrarian. Although, again, there are some places in which, and if you look at like how AI is being used to figure out what molecules that folks should test in pharmaceutical situations and stuff that they never would have even thought to do otherwise, that's where AI gets super, super powerful, where it does things that like it would take humans 300 years to do. That's the stuff I like because we couldn't do it otherwise. But when AI is spitting out things that a human could do otherwise, that I don't know about that, right? But yeah, in terms of the caring enough to argue with one another, I think it's so important, right? And I know I'm not the only one speaking like this, but it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, and it doesn't even matter even if you're in the middle, but people find these little pockets and they create these echo chambers because it's so easy. It's a lot easier to just be around people who share the same opinions as you do, but you're never going to get sharper that way. You're never going to learn. At the very least, even if you disagree with somebody, I'm always looking for someone. I don't want yes, it can be really hard to reach the person that treats, let's say, a political party like a sports team, right? It's not a sports team. It's not something that you stay with come hell or high water, no matter what. That's not it. It was put in place so that every single time, every single cycle, they had to earn your vote with smart policies, with things that really mattered and seemed like they were going to make the world better for everybody. And I think people are treating it like a sports team now, and they're dumbing it down, and it's getting silly. So when that stuff happens in general, I think that's really scary, and it's bad for society. And so I'm always looking for, okay, who has a contrary opinion to what I have and can articulate it well in a way where it's not just like some rah, 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 and they yell a slogan, and it's like, but that doesn't make any sense. Explain to me on a deeper level why you think this is better for all of us. And again, well, I haven't found too much of that, but I think when we try to find it, and I guess I'm talking about that more like politically than I am in general or in the workplace, right? I just think that any of us who have ever been given hard feedback by another person, if you really think back on it, like I'm always so thankful to those people that they put themselves in that situation because it's uncomfortable to actually give me some hard feedback, because it would be easier just to be like, yeah, whatever. But I look at those people that like, actually, they really cared about me or they wouldn't have told me this. So when I can, I try to pull people aside and be like, hey, in that meeting, like you said this way, and this is the way it hit me. I don't know if you meant it that way, but I just feel like I need to tell you. I think that sticks with people. And I think that kind of thing opens the door for somebody to say, yeah, hey, Russ, you're always saying this about AI. I don't know if that's best for the company. I want to hear that. And I want to hear why. I just think otherwise we put it in neutral and we just coast. And that's not how anything is going to get better.
I love that. Well said. I'm going to go and follow some people on social media now. No, just kidding. That's not at all what you're saying. No, but I am going to take more of, I guess, find some common ground to have dialogue with people that maybe don't see eye to eye. And I think the person is more the channel to do that, because people can sense when someone is maybe just trying to be genuine and just have dialogue, and as opposed to everything written just often comes across as combative in a different way.
And actually, I think the most important thing is the ask, is that there is an ask, right? Like so you're asking me these questions, which is why I'm saying this. So all the things I'm saying right now, I don't know how articulate any of it is. And probably after the fact, I'll be like, I wish I didn't say it that way. But you're asking me, right? I think it's Will Reynolds from Sear was saying, somebody told him, I like that you don't advice bomb. We're just like out of nowhere, you tell people you should do this without knowing their background, without knowing their situation, right? And there's a lot of that. So I try not to do that. And I try not to, although clearly I'm good at talking when somebody gets me going, but I try not to do it unless somebody asks me. And that's why it's also important that I ask other people, hey, you said this, and I don't really feel that way. Why did you say that? That's
leading with understanding and trying to contextualize people's opinions, because sometimes when you hear maybe where they're coming from, it hits a little differently than just the blanket opinion.
Yeah.
Russ, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. For those who want to get in touch with you, where should they follow you?
I'm not a big social media guy, but they can find me at thinkcompany.com, that's for sure. And they can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat.
Thank you very much, Russ.
Thank you, Dave.
That's all for today's episode of Philly Tech Connect. Join our community at phillytechentrepreneurs.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, shortlist.io, a digital marketing agency specializing in top-notch link building, content strategy, and web design. Stay innovative, Philly, and see you next time on Philly Tech Connect.
A Lifetime Value Media production.